Hello, I'm Tony Guida, and this is my New York. There are probably 8 million reasons this city is great, and one of them is sitting across from me today, Len Burman. With intelligence, grace, and a dash of humor, Len told us the sports news on television every night. Sometimes he told the nation, too. Here's an example from 1990. Len on the David Letterman Show, riffing on Pete Rose's punishment for gambling on baseball.
5 months in a prison camp.
It's a minimum security, isn't it?
Minimum security.
Yeah, right.
You know, Vegas night. And so, no, 5 months in a 5 months in prison camp, right. And a $50,000 fine.
But
it could have been a lot worse.
And how bad could it have been? It could have been like...
he could have been sentenced to play for the Yankees.
No, hey!
Cheap shot.
No, but...
He is Len Berman, and you will meet him next. Nothing lasts forever, especially not in this business. Len Burman was a beloved presence on WNBC and the NBC network for 27 years, until, all of a sudden, he was not. Big stations could be merciless. Now he keeps his hand in the sports world, blogging for About Sports, and currently is co-host of the morning show on WOR Radio. Nice to have you, and
Tony,
nice to see you.
Nice to see you. It's a funny clip you showed because I told you off camera. I looked at the old clip recently and I said, gee, I used to be Len Burman. That's my standard line. Number two, I actually look not bad. You know?
Don't you love those people who come up to you sometimes on the street? It has happened to me, not terribly often, but didn't you used to be,
Well, here's my nod to Tony Guida. I'm doing the sports news on Channel 4. I'm going to guess... I don't know, does 1990 make sense? Were you there about that time?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And I'm doing the sports, and we get to commercial, and you go, Len, it's not who, it's whom. True story. And you know to this...
Did you punch me in the mouth?
No.
You did.
I like that. I have a blonde... I'm pretty good. My mom was an English teacher, and... I'm usually pretty good when it comes to grammar, and he and I and him and me. I've never, ever since that moment with Tony Guida, I've never used who or whom on the air. Ever. I just refuse to use it.
Get around.
I'll just use some other way to use it.
Talk radio, where you are now, WOR, whole new gig for you.
It is.
Why do that?
A couple of reasons. First of all, it's not sports. See, I was not...
Did you get tired of sports?
I'm not as... Yeah, well, I wasn't as sad about Channel 4 saying goodbye as you'd think, because you know the business.
Sure.
Leading up to that final farewell, they had cut back the editors. They had cut back the equipment. They threw me out of my office. If that wasn't a hint, I had to go sit in the newsroom like with a dunce cap. So, I mean, everything was just getting cut back, squeezed, cut back.
Yeah.
And I'd always said as a joke, I don't want to be doing Devils scores when I'm 65 years old, hockey scores. It did get to the point where it wasn't fun to go to work. I had always loved going to work throughout my career, wherever it was. Now, I couldn't tell anybody that because I'd be going out to interview Derek Jeter. And if I were to say to somebody, my job just isn't fun anymore, they say, what are you, nuts? The Yankees are the world champs. You're interviewing Derek Jeter. It just wasn't as much fun.
But what about talk radio?
Talk radio
attracted you.
I had a boss, the boss of the radio station, Tom Cuddy, who's the program director. He called me up. I joke with him, I'm the only person in broadcast that didn't apply for this job. This is the John Gambling slot after John left. And his family has had that slot since, the 20s?
Right.
So there's a new show.
Hoover, I think.
This is Hoover, right? This is the Teapot Dome scale. So it's a news show. It's not sports. Tom Cuddy, on his own, decided that I could do more than sports. I guess he would see the little riffs on Live at 5 when I would joke around with Sue Simmons or Al Roker. And I wasn't just... And I never consider myself a typical sports fan. In other words, you, Tony Guida, are a huge Mets fan. I was a Yankee fan as a kid with Mickey Mantle, and as I like to tell people, the Mick ain't playing for them anymore. So the whole idea of covering sports made me less of a fan. It was more a news story.
I am a huge and unreconstructed Mets fan since '67, and I'm worried, but we'll get back to that. Talk radio, of course, demands, to be successful, at least I've heard, provocative opinion.
Yeah.
Is that something you like to do?
Well, I'm not really a major opinion guy. So I'm a co-host. My co-host is Todd Schnitt, who is a veteran. That's his real name, Schnitt.
Yeah.
And I told him on the show, sometimes I feel like I'm up Schnitt's Creek without a paddle.
Did he ever think about changing it?
Never, which is smart, because people know that name.
Yeah, sure.
Because I've said to him, I would have changed it in a heartbeat. He said, what are you, crazy? So he's been doing this for 25 years. Right-winger, as the day is long, he'll deny it, but he and Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and I are stationed. They're three peas in a pod. I'd never thought of things in terms of right, left, Republican, Democrat. Now, I'm sure some of my views tend toward the liberal side a little bit, but, for example, to show you how naive I am, I never knew until I started doing the show that the New York Post is a right-wing newspaper. I had no idea. Now, how stupid is that, right? Had no idea the Daily News tended left. No idea. Didn't know.
Probably not
Never thought
anymore,
about it.
but that's...
Well,
yeah, it used to be. Used to be.
Anyway, so I don't like labels, and as I tell on the show, I voted for Obama the first time, I voted for Romney the second time. I hate, and I know hate's a strong word, I hate knee-jerk reaction based on party affiliation or conservative, liberal. I hate when something comes up in Fox Media. Well, it's anti-Obama. Oh, it's anti... I hate the knee-jerking. I'd like to pride myself, and I'll look at each issue individually. And I may come down against the president or against Hillary. Doesn't mean I'm right or left. It just means on that particular... And I wish Congress was like that. I really mean that sincerely. Yeah. I wish people judge things on the individual... As I said on my very first radio show, I like ideals, not ideology. I do.
And... For instance, I mean, it's a New York show, but I imagine you cover world events or talk about world events. This morning, what did you talk about? Well, what's the main thing?
Okay, well, we don't do a lot of world events, so we're not talking about the migrant issue. We're just not doing it. We talked a little bit about the Iran nuclear deal. Today's show was threefold. One, the Pope dominates.
Of course.
He's coming to New York. Bernie Sanders, not Bernie. Do you do that too? Every time I want to say Ben Carson, I say Bernie Sanders. The name begins with a B. Ben Carson talking about a Muslim person, in his estimation, shouldn't be president. That took up a lot of conversation. And we actually talked about your Mets because we were giving away free tickets every half hour, so that'd be
right.
Good.
WOR also is this radio station of the Mets.
To me, a story, and it would cause conflict with my co-host, would have been, and we touched on it briefly, the violence in New York over the weekend. I am very much anti-gun. I am very much with Bloomberg on the gun issue. My co-host owns 27 guns, and I swear he's going to sue the city or the state because they're giving him a hard time about getting a concealed permit. And he wants to have one. Of course, I've already told him if he brings a gun into the studio, I'm out of there. Yeah. But I am very anti-gun, and I don't know where you stand, and it's fine whatever the listeners or viewers think. I just say it's very simple. If you had less guns, you'd have less gun violence. That's what happens in Australia. That's what happens in... I don't want to make a speech. So is this provocative enough for radio?
It's the same thing. Yes, it is, I think, and it's provocative here. I mean, I'll agree with you. I mean, guns... scare me. The people who own guns, by and large, scare me. And the rest of the world is so far ahead of us. Much of the rest of the world is so far ahead of us on this as it is on the death penalty, but that's...
but it is. You look at the...
For another
I looked at the numbers in Japan, Australia, and England, the number of homicides in a given year, a fraction of what happens in Chicago in a month. It's nothing. And they have tough gun laws. So my co-host will say, well, Second Amendment. And then I have to get into this whole speech about how the Second Amendment was written in 1776, and it wasn't written for 2015, and when they wrote the Constitution, women couldn't vote, and people could have slaves. So I don't know, does this have anything to do with sports? What the hell am I talking about? But this is what I'm getting into on a daily basis. Well, I am enjoying it. I really am.
Even getting up at 3 a.m.
That does not bother me. Is that crazy? I worked nights my whole life. Actually, so why am I really doing this? My wife said, "Get the hell out of the house."
Get the hell out of the house.
That's
and
what
the
happened.
pay isn't bad.
It's okay. Yeah, it's like, you know.
Let's go back to your roots, sports. Yeah. Did you always want to be a sportscaster?
No. I was a Mickey Mantle fan. I had a friend of mine tell me that the football team is pretty good. I said, the Giants, Frank Gifford. Oh, okay. So, another friend of mine was a hockey fan. He took me to a hockey game. I was a Mickey Mantle fan.
Well, you grew up
in Queens.
In Queens.
Yeah, I grew up in Long Island City.
And went to Syracuse, which is, among other things, a factory for sports broadcasters.
It is. And I did not go there for sportscasting. I actually went there because I took a series of tests, and they decided that my best aptitude would be engineering.
Really?
But I had a introverted personality, and I had a facility for math and science.
Introverted?
Yeah. And they said engineering. So I went as an engineering major, and I lasted about 2 minutes. And then I wound up... so I went at the radio station my freshman year. And said I'd like to be a disc jockey. I had some kind of feel. I was interested. I used to listen to radio stations as a kid, and I was fascinated that I could be in Queens listening to a Cincinnati Reds game on WLW radio in Cincinnati. It used to fascinate me that you could pick up radio stations from out of town here. Late at night, KMOX St. Louis would have the Cardinals game on, and you'd hear that. You'd hear Harry Carey. So I was fascinated. So I went to the radio station. I said, I'd like to be a disc jockey. They said, well, everyone wants to be a disc jockey. Would you like to read the sports on a Saturday night? Now, there's a couple of things at play here. Number one, if I didn't have a date, that wasn't a problem. Number two, I swear, Tony, I said this, I can read the sports. My thought at the time was, A, you had to be an expert. As you know, now any idiot can be on the air. Right. Number two, when I was growing up at that time, the people doing sports on the TV stations in New York were all former football giants. Frank Gifford, Pat Summerall, Kyle Rote. So I thought you either had to be a genius or be a former player. And I honestly said, I can do that. And I started doing it. And my first job, I couldn't find a sports job. I actually had a news job in Dayton, Ohio, on TV, news reporter / anchor at the age of 23.
Right.
And then I luckily got a sports job in Boston, and I stayed with sports.
So your story, formative years, is not the same as Marv Albert, at least the one he told me.
Oh, sure.
Which was, even as a kid in grammar school,
he knew.
He would take the tape recorder to the playground, the local playground, and the kids were playing whatever game they were playing, and he would do play-by-play into his little...
And he and his two brothers, Al and Steve, in their apartment would make believe. They would turn the sound down on the TV. He knew. He was a ball boy for the Knicks.
Yeah.
He knew that. Now, the Syracuse story is funny. So he went to Syracuse because his mentor, Marty Glickman, had been there. Marty was the first of the Syracuse. Now you have Bob Costas, Ian Eagle, Mike Tirico, and Sean McDonough, and Dick Stockton. I know I've left out a few. All went to Syracuse. So my standard line is, why do you think all those sportscasts... In fact, I was asked by a Syracuse alumni group, why did I suppose that all these, announcers went to Syracuse? And I gave it the old... Well, I really think none of us could get into Cornell. So that was my response. And by the way, that was true. That was a true story.
We should talk, since we mentioned the Mets, I'm worried.
As we sit here recording.
As we sit here recording, I'm worried. They have, as we speak, they have a 6-game lead.
They're not going to blow that.
They're not going to blow it this year?
No, they're not going to blow it. Here's your concern, and it's valid. Number one, their bullpen. If they can't get 8 innings out of the starter.
The other night, 11 runs they gave up the bullpen. 11 runs in 4 innings.
So if they can't get 8 innings out of the starter and hand the ball to Familia, they're screwed. Number two is this Harvey thing, I think, is a disaster. I think pitching him for 5 innings, then taking 2 weeks off.
What happened there?
Well,
what happened with
apparently
Boris and...
Well, medically, apparently there's a limit of innings they want. Well, you remember a couple of years ago, Washington made the playoffs and Steven Strasburg. They just shut him down.
Yeah.
They shut him down, and they thought, oh, well, we'll be in the playoffs next year. So that's a tough thing to do. So Washington's not going to be in the playoffs for 2 years in a row. So they had this idea. He's coming back from Tommy John surgery. So they figured, okay, we'll make this 180 innings. Well, then when the agent gets involved, it becomes all about money and his future. So that's where it gets muddied, because it's not about, is it really about the player's well-being for the Mets? No, it's about his future free agency. But
what I didn't understand is Okay, if you want to establish inning limits,
Right.
okay. You want to go along with doctors' advice, fine.
Yep.
But all of this, one would have thought, would have been worked out in the spring and over the summer, and all of a sudden, late in the game, and pardon the pun, comes Scott Boras saying the Mets are putting my client in peril.
I know. Is that something? Yeah.
And
well, that's Boras. He's the agent. Do you know? I in fact, I looked this up to just confirm the facts. You know, they asked Terry Collins after the game the other night. You know, Harvey went 5 innings, pitched great, one hitter, took him out, and the team got slaughtered by the Yankees. Terry Collins said, "Well, I'm old school," meaning, you know, I would have. You know, in the old days, they just went and pitched. And do you remember there was a game? I got to tell you about it. 1963. Juan Marichal of the Giants faced Warren Spahn of the Braves. You know how many innings they pitched?
yeah, well, I don't, but it was extra innings, and
They both pitched shutout ball into the 16th inning before Willie Mays won the game with a home run in the bottom of the 16th. Marichal threw 227 pitches. That would be 3 Harvey performances. Spahn pitched 201 pitches that day. It was just different. They just pitched and pitched and pitched.
what is the difference?
Well,
what,
the difference
what
is-
happened to
what
the
happened?
Tom Seavers? I mean, Matt Harvey, you could say, is today's Tom Seaver.
Right.
But Seaver pitched 300 innings, and you know, he was what they call a horse. I mean, his arm, you know.
Yep.
What happened?
Well, I've talked
What's
to
different?
Tommy John about this. His feeling is that from day one, the kids pitch too much nowadays. Back then, you know, they would pitch. They'd take the off season. They'd be off. The season wasn't as long. They didn't start throwing as kids as much. Tommy John says all in the amount of pitching. And, you know, kids now, if they're thought to be a good pitcher, the parents take them to this league, to that league, to this all-star camp, to that, and they're pitching constantly. You can't help but ruin your arm doing that. So that's Tommy John's theory. And you know, over a third of Major League pitchers have had Tommy John surgery. Yeah. Over a third.
Everybody on the Mets staff, starting staff, has had
Pretty
Tommy
much.
John.
Is it all of them?
I think it's all of them.
Right.
And the woman who now does the commentary on ESPN on physical, I don't know. I don't think she's a doctor, but she may be a physical
Talk about
therapist.
injuries and things. Yeah.
Talks about how I think it's a third of the pitchers who have Tommy John surgery have a second.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that crazy?
And there's no science.
Yeah,
There's no science to these inning limits. There's no science to any of it. They don't know. They're guessing. And I promise you, I promise you, we're not going to make this program all about the Mets, but one more question.
Yeah.
Cespedes, are they going to re-sign him?
Probably not. I mean, from a financial standpoint, my guess is knowing, you know, the Wilpons history and they've been burned a few times. You know, they gave Bonilla the long contract, and and Beltran, and so they've been burned a few times. And my guess is maybe not, unless Cespedes just loves the town. You know, he was on Page 6 the other day, restaurant downtown. If he loves the town, and all of a sudden he stopped hitting, though, that's got to concern you too.
Well, yeah. And the interesting thing about with this extraordinary production he has brought to the Mets, he's hitting under 200 at Citi Field.
That's not good.
No.
No wonder you're worried, Tony.
I'm worried.
Maybe you should be worried.
Can they beat the Dodgers? If they hold out, they'll play the Dodgers.
Well, you know, that's an interesting case because the Dodgers have a great 1-2 pitching combination, too.
Yeah.
I'm just worried about that middle bullpen. Really, who's going to pitch the ball if you have to turn it over in the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th innings? That's the concern.
How's your arm?
It's not good.
No?
Yeah, it's not, but I haven't had Tommy John surgery, so I'm ahead of the game. Oh, here's my other favorite Tony Guida story. You were anchoring the news one night on Channel 2, and it was one of these fluffy throwaway stories about sumo wrestling in August at Madison Square Garden, and Tony Guida says, hot time, sumo in the city. Now, I don't know if your listeners know Love and Spoonful, but that was hot time, summer in the city.
Right.
Big Love and Spoonful.
I stole that from somebody, and
You don't have to.
I'd love to claim it.
I thought it was a great line.
It was a great line, and I would love to claim it, but I stole it from a CBS network correspondent named Bernie
Goldberg.
Goldberg.
Well, he's now does stuff with O'Reilly on Fox.
Yeah. And I told him
Oh, you gave him credit? All right. You didn't give him credit on the air that night.
No, I didn't.
You hump.
Why blow a good thing?
Good line.
Yeah, it's a great line. I should tell you another one I stole. That
Go ahead.
goes-
I like these war stories. See, it's may not be
The
interesting
11
to the
o'clock,
viewers.
the
but-
11 o'clock news on a Sunday night, I was anchoring on Channel 2, and I was done. They were getting rid of me.
Oh.
But that wasn't public
So you were a
yet.
short-timer.
And this was my
Lame
last
duck.
show.
Oh, it was your last show.
And it was the weekend of the all the ceremony about the Statue of Liberty.
Oh.
That weekend.
100th year of the
whatever it
nation
was.
or whatever. I don't know.
And all the stations had been broadcasting live from.
Did you trash
down
Lady Liberty?
I didn't.
Okay, good.
I came close, but and I asked the sports guy. I said, so it had been wall to wall all weekend, all the stations covering this stuff. And I asked the sports guy. I said, when you're done with sports, ask me this question.
It was a setup.
Tony, we've been through a weekend of what was your impression of the festivities? And so, and he does the question. And I said, sorry, Richard, I don't do impressions. And I stole that from Airplane. My whole career is
That's kind of
plagiarism.
Did anybody appreciate that?
Oh yeah.
Oh, did you?
My co-anchor went face down. He went face down on the desk.
Very funny. There are
when I met-
stories. Let me tell you that just because we're talking war stories. Remember the late Ralph Penza?
Sure.
Very solid news
Great
reporter.
reporter.
So he was anchoring the weekend news, I think, on Channel 4, and I was doing it one night.
I think I know this story.
Well, I don't know if you remember Walter Hudson, the 900-pound man. Remember there was
yes, I do.
Remember there was a heavy guy named Walter Hudson, and they couldn't get him out of his house. They needed a crane. They needed to break.
Sure.
He's 900 pounds.
Right.
May he rest in peace. So I said to her in commercial, he'd make a great goaltender. You just lie him down on the ice. Nothing's going to get past him, right? Okay, we come out of commercial. Ralph Penza says on the air, Len thinks Walter Hudson would make a great goaltender. And it's, oh, my Ralph, what are you killing me?
No. I love spanning the world, which
thank
you invented, I think. And how did that come about?
Well, it came about because, it came about at Channel 2 one night. Remember Cliff Gelb, the producer?
Sure.
Good guy. I think he's still in business at ABC. And a highlight.
Lives in my building.
Oh, does it? Oh, good guy.
Yeah.
How old's his son
Terrific
now?
guy.
I remember. Anyway, up there. So a clip comes in from the Midwest of a county fair horse race. And right at the finish line, the horse in first place turns around and bites the horse in second place in the neck. And the announcer on the county fair says, "That's the damnedest thing I've ever seen." Well, I've since been told by a horse racer it's called savaging, whatever. So I said to Cliff, we just can't use the highlight. You can't say Mets win, Yankees lose, and the nag bit the crap out of the second. You can't. So we invented it. Let's call it something. So we found some old black and white footage. We had this file called Cinedex at the time. Old, like a guy getting shot in the stomach with a cannonball, and two cats fighting, just dopey stuff. So we bookended the crazy footage. And we intentionally called it Spanning the World as a goof. It was an inside joke because ABC, Jim McKay, spanning the globe to bring you the infinite varieties.
Exactly.
So I turned to Cliff and said, well, they span the globe. Let's span somewhere else. We're sitting there on a weekend day at Channel 2.
And you're still doing it on the Today Show.
Still doing it on Today's Show. It's been on Today's Show since 1989.
We got a couple of clips. They're probably spanning clips,
Right.
but not in a spanning format, which years ago on Letterman, you brought them on and had a little fun with him. Let's take a look at that.
Cool.
This is Steve Lyons of the Chicago White Sox. He's safe, but he has dirt in his pants. So he decides to just get the dirt out of his pants. And I'm on television. But that's every guy's fantasy. He gets a standing ovation for his pants being down. How about Chichi Rodriguez? Now, you like golf, right?
Oh, I love it.
Do you know the
Try
rules
and
of golf?
Keep me off the greens.
What's the rule here?
What do you do? That's in the home. Oh!
My line is not I don't even get to do my line.
Yeah. What is the line?
The line is you don't score it a birdie and you don't score it a bogey. You score it a beagle.
Scored a beagle.
Yeah. I'm sorry I did that.
Morty, the clips are better and the clothing is a little nicer.
He's comparing you to,
He's
comparing you to Albert.
You know, it's funny when I did my bad joke there, I just said in the studio, I'm sorry I said that. And I said that so it's the same, I had the same reaction. God, I'm sorry I said that.
I want to remind the audience you wrote 4 books, one of them called And Nobody Got Hurt, which is what you used to say.
Book of bloopers, yeah.
But one of them was the 25 greatest baseball players of all time.
Yeah.
Who did you have to leave out?
Oh, it's unbelievable. What I did was I got a blue ribbon panel. I mean, so I had Ralph Branca actually voted, Bernie Williams, Jeffrey Lyons. I had Raleigh Heeman, the famous executive, Chris Russo. Actually, Koufax didn't make it. Oh, my God. Yogi didn't make it. Here's the problem with the book. I couldn't sell it. You go to Detroit, they say, well, where's Al Kaline? You go to Baltimore, they say, oh, where's Jim Palmer and Cal Ripken? You couldn't win with a book like that.
Who was one?
We didn't rank them, but Babe Ruth was number one of all time. The book that was very successful, I did something called, also for young readers, 25 Greatest Moments in Sports. That made the Times bestseller, and that was more successful.
Well, I hope it's still selling. And it's great to see you.
We've done it already?
That's it? It goes very
came all
quickly.
the way, put on makeup, and that's it.
Put in makeup, and it's over. You know, you get your $2.50 fee on the way out the door.
This is true. I'm not sucking up. I always enjoyed working with you. I really did. So I'm really glad that you asked me. Thank you.
It's great to see you, Len.
Thank you.
And I will see you next week.